Let me guess, you from the town that I love best. Talk Memphis, I wish you would. Talk Memphis, you sound so good.
Number 4 on our list, we can kind of do these two at the same time. 38016 and 38018. It's Cordova.
Yep.
I bought my first residential home in Cordova in 2002. God, I think that's when it was. 2002. So that bought my first residential home there. It's $135,000, and it's still worth $135,000.
Right. I was gonna say, it looks like the average is 144 this year.
Yeah, there's not been a ton of moving in Cordova. Here's what we're finding in Cordova, though. We're finding that investors are going out there for the 1% rule, and they're finding it. You can occasionally get a little bit better number than that, but not too often. I mean, what you're going to find are 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes that rent for, the 1%, $1,200, $1,300. I mean, that's typical of what you're going to find out there. So,
Cordova's changed. I mean, like, it's that whole Germantown Road. I mean, every restaurant you can imagine
is on Germantown Parkway.
Right. Store, food, retail, everything is just right up and down. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Because, I mean, I was just doing the numbers. Between those two zip codes, 3811016 and 38018, 1,200 houses have sold in 6 months, which is a lot.
A lot.
And 20% of those are investors. So it's low as far as from an investor. But that's still 240 houses that investors bought. But out of that 240, a majority of them are going to be our hedge funds.
A large portion.
Yeah.
And they're still buying.
They're
Main
Street Renewal.
Main Street, Frio, Progress. I mean, those guys are still out there buying. And they buy 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage.
That's right.
1,500 square feet.
They've got a box.
Yeah.
Literally, like...
They call it a buy box.
A buy box.
That's literally the name of it. So they have criteria that fits in there.
Is it newer than 80?
Newer than 90.
90?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So...
No power lines, no pools. I mean, they got criteria. I know the criteria.
No power lines.
Can't have power lines that run right behind it. They're rentals. They got families. They don't, they're not.
Just thinking about the liability.
They don't want to be right next to schools. I mean, for whatever reason, they don't want to be hugged up to a school.
And then when they find those, they're willing to pay a premium.
They'll pay that's right.
Whatever it takes.
I sold my own personal home to them in like 10 minutes. Put it on the market a couple of years ago. 10 gone. Now, and it wasn't in Cordova. It was a different area. But there's that price range. Those buyers are out there. They're paying cash. They just had a $200 million capital raise that they've got to spend.
I went to breakfast with one of the guys that runs their one of these funds, property management companies.
Yeah.
And they're buying here, but he's like, he wasn't being arrogant about it. He was just saying, my pockets are deeper than yours.
Big time.
And I can pay whatever it takes to get that house. Because we got cheap money and we got to spend it. If it's just sitting on the sideline, they're not making money with it. So they're willing to put that money to work. So this is where I feel like a huge juice of that money ends up in these
two zip codes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in Arlington, it does as well. Let me give you some of these numbers. Dan just mentioned some of them, but 38016, 682 sales this year. Average home sales price is $181,000. Number of bank sales is 89. That's high. $136,000 is that average bank price. Number of investor purchases is 132. That's just under 20% of the total zip or sales in the zip code. Average investor price right at $144, and those are renting for $1,350 to $1,500.
Yeah.
Number of foreclosures 48, so that's along with 38018, they've had 78 this year, and so that's I didn't
8 a month. Yeah,
it's not too bad. In 38018, sharing Cordova as the second zip code, number of home sales is 536. Average home sale price there is 189, just a tick up from 38016. Bank sales is 65. Investor purchases is 100. Same thing, just under 20% of the total sales. Investor sales price is just about the same, 147. Number of foreclosures is 30. Average foreclosure amount is 148,000. So very, very similar zip codes, very similar numbers in returns. Germantown Parkway does run right through there. What do you think from a long-term perspective? Because I get this question quite a bit. Dean, what do you think of Cordova?
Yeah.
What do you think's going to happen out there in Cordova? Because of the first-time home buyers, tenants, never-ending supply of land. I mean, they got land that can continue to go out there that the city's got, so they can build more of these. I mean, we're even seeing some turnkey outfits are building out neighborhoods for. That's something to talk about. Building out neighborhoods for totally tenants. I caution investors on this, and you might have a different opinion, but I caution investors on buying a rental home in a community that was specifically built for rental homes.
If they're not going to mix use it, some retail, some rental, that is, I don't want to say disaster waiting to happen, but it's not a good thing.
No, because here's the bad of that. Let's say you build out a couple streets, 100 homes, which sounds like a lot, but for a whole neighborhood, it's
with hundreds of homes.
Yeah, with hundreds of homes, this isn't bad. But let's say you got a little two sections they've opened up, and they're going to build 20 in each section. That's 40 homes. Okay, so you go in there and you buy them specifically for tenants. I guess they would sell it to a residential person, but it is built with the idea that, hey, Mr. Investor, we're going to build this home. It's halfway done. We're going to charge you $130,000. It's going to rent for $1,250 to $1,300. You get your 1% return, but it's a brand new home. Now, that sounds great. Brand new, never get a maintenance call. That's awesome. I admit that. I mean, there's nothing wrong. But what's it look like in 5 years?
Right.
And then the real question is, what's it look like in 8 or 9? You've had tenants living here in this whole area. The turnover is not as high in the $40,000, $50,000 range, but you're going to get some turnover. You're going to get some people transferring in and out, jobs, take you different areas. So what's that look like in 5 to 10 years? Have the tenants taken care of the street? Are they taking care of the houses?
House, the yard. Yeah.
And, what's your value done over in that time frame? Well, there's just so many unknowns.
It's an analogy I always use, like for duplexes. I've never bought where duplexes is all that street is.
That's right. For the same reason.
Like there's one zip code or one street in 38112 that it's 4 or 5 duplexes and then the rest is homes. That's a good mix, but if it's like 20 duplexes and that's it, it's pretty much a disaster waiting to happen in Memphis, Tennessee. And, like there's several, I'm talking about 38118 just pops in your head. Yeah. Every street that has just zip codes is just, turns into not a war zone, but it's a definitely difficult situation. So
because you're the tenants, they're lower tenants, they're the $350, $400 tenants, right. And I mean, I'm not talking negatively about that specific pool as a whole. Sure, but I mean, you got $400 tenants, you're going to get $400 problems. Yeah,
and there's no pride of taking care of the house or the yard or anything. And that's the only concern I have in certain areas of Cordova if they're doing build to rent. And the whole subdivision is build to rent. That's a little bit, worrisome, I would say, unless you've got an HOA. Now I could see where that could work.
The HOA might.
I don't know if have you heard of anybody doing that though? I haven't heard of
it's so expensive to set those up. And then who's going to run?
Who's going to run it?
And they don't start until the community's like 90% completed. Right. So I mean,
if they had
a tenant run it.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah, right. I just don't. To your point, I don't think I've heard of a build a rent that had an HOA included. That would help fix that because they would give notices and give fines.
So you got to have the developer and the builders take it on for the first 4 or 5 years.
That's right. And if they're willing to do that, I think that makes a lot of sense. But if they're not, and it's a whole subdivision, I'd just be cautious.
Yeah, because they're selling you that house and they're done. I mean, you know what I mean? Like
they moved on.
They've done their job.
Right.
I mean, they built the house and sold it to you. It's up to you to figure it out. I really caution people on spending that kind of money. For one, I don't like the 1% rule, but 2, that kind of money on something that, man, I can't tell. Here we go. I like the history. I like to be able to say there's data to support what I'm going to buy. So when I go I buy in an area that's historically good, playing the numbers. When you come out and buy something like that, it's pretty and shiny up first, but you got no idea what the next 5 years or 10 years are going to look like for Cordova, for that street, for the whole thing.
Do you think that Cordova could turn into Hickory Hill?
Yeah, I do. If
the rental
market keeps getting busier and busier, and they're selling more and more of those, because you already see what's happening at Wolf Chase, right? You see the crime.
Sad.
It's very sad. You see
Holy
the crime out there at Wolf Chase.
Well, they're just not. Yeah, they're just allowed a behavior out there, and I don't feel like taking my kids and going shopping at the Wolf Chase.
No,
it feels a little bit
dangerous.
Yeah, just because there's kids, teenagers, older teenagers that are just walking because they're bored, nothing to do.
Well, mom and dad are dropping you off after school, or you're getting off the bus right around the corner, and you're hey, I'll walk to the mall till 5 or 6. Mom, come pick me up. That is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I am worried about that. Germantown Mall specifically, that they've got to do something quickly to.
The people that run that, I don't know the logistics of running a mall, but the people that do that have got to come up with better security. They need to come up with some rules about, if you're under 18, you can't be
by yourself,
or under 16, maybe you can't just be, coming there by yourself. You got to have a guardian. They got to come up with something. Because kids are, they're shooting, and it's sad because that mall is nice. That area is nice. There's restaurants around there. There's development. Carter's had me out to Dave and Buster's 5 times already. So there's
a lot of good stuff.
A lot of good
stuff. It's going to get messed up if we're not careful.
Yeah.
So that's my only concern is just keeping that mix right with the home ownership. If the home ownership tips too far over 50%,
what's that going to look like?
What's it going to look like? It's going to look different. So.
I swear I can't get enough.